Good morning, everyone. I'm Tom Lennox, and I'd like to call to order this special meeting of the Town of Hilton Head Island Finance and Administrative Committee, Tuesday, June 16th, 2020. Zendaya, have we complied with the Freedom of Information Act?
Yes, sir, we have.
Thank you. Committee members, please unmute yourself and reply with present or here. Zendaya, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Harkins,
Here.
Ms. Becker,
Here.
Mr. Lennox.
Here.
Thank you.
Does staff have any changes to this agenda?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman, we do not have any changes at this time.
Thank you, Zendaya. May I have a motion, therefore, to approve the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda as shared.
Second.
Thank you. Committee members, if you have any changes to this agenda, please state them when called upon by Zendaya. Otherwise, please unmute yourself and vote yes or no to approve this agenda.
Mr.
Zendaya, would
Harkins?
you please call the roll?
Mr. Harkins,
Yes.
Ms. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Lennox.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Zendaya, will you call the roll for the approval of the minutes? Again, committee members, please unmute yourself to vote yes or no.
Move for approval, yes.
Second.
Mr. Harkins,
Yes.
Ms. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Lennox.
And yes, thank you.
Thank you all.
Zendaya, do we have any citizen comments?
Mr. Chairman, public comments concerning today's agenda items were to be submitted electronically via the town's open town hall portal. The public comment period closed yesterday at noon, and at the conclusion of the open town hall, there were no comments, nor did any citizens sign up to speak at today's meeting.
Okay, thank you. We have no unfinished business. We have new business that I think is particularly relevant to this committee's function and to the emergency that we're going through. We have expressed over the past number of months concern about the impact of the state of emergency and the coronavirus on the island, as well as the region and state. And we have asked John Troyer, Director of Finance, to report to this committee throughout this emergency monthly on the revenues and expenses and any surplus, deficit, and unfavorable or favorable variances. And that's what John has done. He's forwarded a presentation, and I think it's going to be quite enlightening to the committee. John, good work on the presentation. I look forward to your comments.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to try to share my screen and we'll walk through this and certainly welcome any comments and questions. If you look at our revenue, our budgeted revenue is in four main pieces: debt service, general fund, stormwater, and CIP. This gives you a little picture of the amounts and the relative amounts for each. For year-to-date collections, $68.3 million compared to $69 million of last year to date. So we're a little bit down from last year. It could be much worse, and so this gives you a picture of where we are. Of course, our fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30th, and this is May year-to-date numbers. And if you wanted to tie these back to our monthly financial statements, it comes from page 7. So, how much is left to collect in this fiscal year? We're 86% collected, 14% to go. In a normal year, that's pretty good. We're comfortable with the 86%. And this is our budget to actual of those 4 main categories. Property taxes, here's a picture. We're very seasonal on property taxes. You can see January and February are the biggest months by far, but we're not finished, and we've got a little bit left to collect in June, and we'll see how that goes. But by far, the vast majority of the collections have already happened. You can kind of see where we compare this year to last year. 25.1 million compared to 24.5 million, so we're up about $600,000, 2.4%. As I can remind you, last year town council voted consumer price index adjustment on the millage rate, and that was about 1.4%. So if you take that away, we're 1% ahead of collections from last year to date, which is it shows some growth. How are we doing to budget? And these are our budgeted funds for property taxes. We've got just a little bit more to go. We're 98.5% collected, and so we feel real comfortable that we're going to meet budget on property taxes. This piece of property taxes, to answer the question, how much of the general fund is property taxes? 36%. So we can say, okay, in that section of the general fund budget, we're comfortable, and we'll make budget and be fine to finish out June 30th. Another area, just to show some diversity of revenue, business licenses, you can see are back end loaded, and so we get the vast majority of our business license income in June, and that's just the way the timing works on the schedule. How are we doing so far? Our local, what we collect locally as 71% collected, which is good for this time of year. There was a delay in the due date, and so Saturday, June 20th, is our due date, and we're getting a lot of activity last week and this week, and so we're appreciative of everybody paying, and we're almost finished. State collects some for brokerage, insurance, and some other businesses, and it's always at the end of the year when we get their large payment. So we have to wait until the end to see how we do. Here's just a picture of the same schedule. Our local, we're making really good progress, and in the state, we wait for a large payment at the end of the year. Stormwater, we've already collected budget, and so we can feel good about that section of the budget. And we're already above budget, so we're glad to report that. Year to date, we put our collections together as a percent of a total. Last year through May, we collected 89%, 89.7% of the eventual total. And so if you were just to compare May year to date to June, at the end of the year, we were 89%. This year, we're 86.4% of budget, and that would be an indicator that we're a little bit behind, but with the change in the due date of business licenses, that helps to compensate for that. We think that that's just a shift in timing from April to June rather than a decrease in the total. And this is one of our busiest collection weeks this week, and so we'll have some more numbers very, very quickly. Just where we're getting this year to date as a percent of total, and 2020 as a percent of budget. And so we're on track. We'd like to be a little bit ahead, but I think with the change in due date, we're fine. The year-to-date expenditures were 6.2% more than last year. A couple of items that really influenced that. Low Country Celebration Park has been full speed ahead for this year, and Stormwater has been full speed ahead on a number of substantial projects, and those two are the leading indicators for year-to-year changes on spending. Year-to-date expenditures as a percent of the total were 87% spent, 13% to go, and this is related to the budgeted funds, and this is a normal. June is normally higher in our expenditure month because on a normal month we don't include all the accruals, and in June we make sure that we do include all the accruals. And you can think about a utility bill that we receive in July that's related to June. We pull that back and make sure that it's booked into June. We also do payroll. We might pay our last payroll of the year in the first week in July, but it relates to June, and we pull that back into June as well. And so that just helps to give a picture of why June would be larger than normal, and we would expect instead of a normal 8% month, it would be a 12 or 13% month. How are we doing on budget for the general fund? Right on track with how we were last year, 79.2 to 79.3. This is a picture of very comfortably under budget, and so and it looks very much like last year. General fund expenses by month, you can see here's the same dynamic. We've got a variation within each month, but as we include all the accruals in June, our numbers, our percentages go up. And this is a picture of last year, 2019, and we expect 2020 to look very similar. If you put this, the orange in dollar amounts is 2019, the gray is 2020. You can see how closely 2020 tracked to 2019, and you can see we've got one big month left, and that would be June. Also, I wanted to point out that if you look at February, March, April, and May, gray are all less than 2019, and so you can see as this coronavirus hits, you can see when we have the opportunity to save and delay spending, we've taken that, and it shows in these numbers. Year to date, if we were to put those back together, you can see our 2020 tracks 2019. We've got one more month to go, and so you can see this, we're almost there to finish out the year. General fund revenues by month compared to last year. If you look, I wanted to show also that 2019 is orange, 2020 again is gray. January and February, really good months for 2020, and that's how we were looking going into the COVID-19 pandemic. And very, very strong economy, strong collections, and so that when March and April hit, you can see March and April were lower than last year. We had the benefit of good January and good February in our numbers. And again, June is a big collection month, and that will make a difference in finishing out this year. How are we doing year to date? Here we can track the line is 2020 and the bar graph is 2019, but very, very close to last year. Took a collection of other revenues outside of the general fund just as indicators. How else are we doing?
John, may I stop you there? And
yes.
To the committee and council members that are a part of this meeting, this slide really tells the story of where we were going into the emergency, where we were through the emergency, and where we are to date. And I don't think anyone expects it to be over yet, but slide number 26, John, in my opinion, really is the tail of the tape as to the impact and where that impact on various sources of revenue affected the town. John, take it away.
Absolutely. Yes, Mr. Chairman, you're absolutely right. You can see the hospitality tax is down significantly. Some of that is going to be due to the change in the due date. Some of that is going to be due to just a reduction in economic activity, and we'll find out much more here by the end of this month. One of the takeaways on this, though, is I think this also underscores just the benefit, and I've got it on a later slide, but I'll show it again. and I don't think we can say it enough, is the diversity of revenue. We've got all these different revenue streams that act independently, and so that if one area like our hospitality tax is down, you've got some of these other areas that are up, and I think that helps the town stabilize in a difficult economic environment. And if you put all of these together as slightly more than last year, I think we can all be thankful. And if you just
John, one more comment. Would you go back to slide 26 and focus on the hospitality tax? At the end of April, we were off 30%. And the month of April, all the bars and restaurants were closed down. And as you recall, they went to-go menus and takeout menus, and they started to open up a little bit on a limited basis in May. And we reduced that unfavorable variance in hospitality tax from 30% in April to 13% in May. And if that trend continues, John, in June, what do you think that unfavorable variance will be?
Yeah, I'm real hopeful, and we'll see. There's also one other dynamic that is in here, is that there's an option for businesses to pay quarterly and monthly, and so we have a not necessarily consistent between years on that, and we have the change in the due date also, and so I think we've got a lot of different dynamics going on that will start to even out once we get through this June 20th due date. And so we are monitoring the hospitality, the beach, and the local accommodations tax very, very closely, and the business license as well.
Thank you.
Just in a bar graph, you can see some are up and some are down, and I think that really helps and serves the town very well to have the different revenue streams available. And keep in mind, outside of these, which are more economic activity related, our property taxes were in, and that's a nice stabilizing force to our revenue stream as well. If you look at general fund, yes.
You could just go back where the electric fee. Would you expand on what that is, please?
Sure. The electric franchise fee is with Palmetto Electric, and it's based on activity, and so based on usage. And I think part of that is going to be dependent upon weather. We have a more mild spring, and people don't use as much electricity. Also, with the reduction of economic activity, people are out, businesses are closed, they use less electricity, there's less franchise fee here. We're hoping that that balances back, but it is one good measure of economic activity.
Yeah, that really is the canary in the mine. I never thought of it that way, but why turn the lights on if no one's coming in? Thank you.
Sure, and if businesses have reduced hours, they use less electricity. In a normal year, and this is a picture of 2019, and it's basically, if you want to use a business term, a net income by month for the town's general fund. And obviously we're not in the business of making an income, but we are very in tune with how closely revenues and expenditures relate. And you can see that the first 7 months of the year, expenditures are very steady, revenues are more back-end loaded, property taxes come in January and February, and it isn't until then that this turns around. But this is a picture of last year as more of a normal base year. And if you look, we had 7 months in a row, the first 7 months, expenses were ahead of revenues, and that's normal. And yet, if you look by June, last year we were able to report a surplus. and put some money back in reserves, which it certainly serves the town very, very well this year when we have so much revenue uncertainty. How are we doing? How does that 2019 look compared to this year? 2019 is orange, 2020 is the blue. Our numbers are tracking very, very closely to last year. And if you just look at May and June, this is where we were, the orange, where we were in May of last year. And by June, we reported a $2 million surplus to finish out 2019. It'll be interesting to see what our June collections are. And if you recall how important our June numbers were, to see, but we're very, very close and in good shape through May, and we need a strong month in June. Key issues, obviously we want to continue to control expenditures, and we at the town are looking for ways to reduce, delay, and cut expenditures, and that continues. And you've seen that in some of our earlier slides, that those are less than last year. And Mr. Chairman, yes, continue to monitor revenues. We'll continue to do this for F&A as long as we need to, until the COVID threat is through, until the revenue picture is much more clear and people are comfortable with this. Yes, we all need to monitor revenues. June, we're off to a good start to June, and we want to have a good finish to June. We're close to putting the fiscal 2020 in the books, and I think if you were to consider and say at the start of the fiscal year, we're going to endure a pandemic, and for March, April, May, and June, 4 months of the year have a pandemic and still have an option or an opportunity to break even for the general fund, even in a pandemic, I think that's astounding and in a good way. And so that's what we hope to be able to report. And so fiscal 2021, that's part of, we turn our focus from how do we do in this fiscal year, how do we do in the first 4 months of the pandemic. I think we're in good shape as long as we have a strong June. And once we'll continue to monitor economic activity in fiscal 2021, and we're going to have to adjust and adjust where necessary. But I would like to say that our total budget of $75.9 million is less than our $79 million of last year. And even from this lower amount, we're holding off on merit raises, we're holding off on capital, and we're holding off on things that we can choose to hold off on until we have a better picture of revenue. And so I think that's positioning the town very well in order to work through this pandemic and still continue to provide services as a town. And this last comment here, I wanted to emphasize that the town is now benefiting from the wisdom of previous town council's actions, building reserves and diversifying revenue streams. That's so important in this kind of economy and in this kind of pandemic. Certainly would lead people to the monthly financial statements, lead people to the annual report. And yes, we will keep presenting revenue details each meeting. We certainly can't share enough information, so we'll try to give you more than what you want. Certainly would open this up to any comments and questions.
Thank you, John. I'd like to open it up now to committee members, and I know Glenn and David are on as well to ask any questions or make any comments of John.
John, this is Bill speaking. First, excellent report, and better than I anticipated. What early guidance is this giving you in terms of the range of activity that you may be recommending to us on the capital budget?
Well, the early guidance will be, and one of the things that we see is hospitality tax is an important component of capital, and so that's something that's going to have to continue to be on our minds and continue to probably look to postpone and delay uh, well into 2021. I'm hopeful. If you look at the economic activity today, look at cars, there's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of people on the island, and hopefully that's translating into economic activity, and hopefully that's translating into hospitality tax collections, beach fee collections, accommodations tax collections, and business license collections. But the proof will be in their returns, and hospitality being one that's very important for capital, we want to make sure that you hit those first quarters, you hit that last quarter in that's related to June that we collect in July, and also that first quarter that's going to come in October that's really related to July, August, and September. Those will be key, and we're going to watch those like a hawk until then.
If I understand what you're saying, then translated is that you're advising us to stay in a holding pattern on committing to major capital activity till the calendar year end.
At least through first quarter, and I think we'll have a really good picture at the end of first quarter. You take the Low Country Celebration Park, and that is all systems go, and I'm very comfortable from a financial standpoint. We have the funds in place to finish that project, and there's no reason not to finish that project. But I hesitate when we talk about starting a new project, and so I think this time might be well spent to plan and design and consider. But before we hit the green light on future projects, we want to make sure our revenues are back.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions?
Yeah, well, I'd like to say something, Tom, if I may.
Certainly.
John, I want to thank you for making a presentation suitable for dummies like myself. It was very reassuring, comprehensive, encouraging, and I understood it. I want to thank you for how you present and doing it in a way that I think our citizens can understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Tom, can I just ask one question?
Sure.
Okay, great. John, I also want to compliment you on the presentation. It was seamless and easy to understand and follow, and I appreciate your doing it that way. I didn't get the benefit of it. It only came in about 15 minutes prior to the meeting starting, so I didn't get the benefit of actually looking through it and coming up with questions that I would have liked to have either asked prior to the meeting or asked during the meeting. So I'm going to reserve my questions and ask if you would indulge me with perhaps an email or two later today or tomorrow, so that I can follow up on some things that have come to mind as you've made the presentation. But thank you for your hard work, and I appreciate what you do.
Okay, and yes, and I would hope that you would consider this the start of a conversation, and we're going to continue this conversation throughout this until this pandemic is through. And so, yes, I apologize for not having this information out earlier, but I look at this as just a start, and we'll keep providing information and keep giving opportunities for questions and comment.
Thank you.
Tom, I have a comment, if I might.
Yes.
I want to echo my colleagues' applause for you, John. This is a report that I can understand, and sometimes I can't say that I fully understand them, so you've done a great job there. I do have a comment, and that is that I think I would say I'm pleasantly surprised that our hospitality and ATAX revenues have not been more severely impacted than they have been as a result of the pandemic. And the only reason that I can see for that is that the tourists have continued to come to town and spend money rather than staying home and sheltering. Do you see any other reasons for that? It's just a curiosity of mine that we didn't have more of an impact.
There was a lot of people bookings, I think if you would call that, of bookings that were fulfilled, and so that there was a lot that was in the pipeline when we started to slow down, and I think there was still economic activity that was going on, and it didn't go to zero, and we can all be thankful that it didn't go to zero. And as we can all tell right now on the island, economic activity is ramping up, and we hope that collections are right with that.
Thank you.
Glenn, let me echo what you just said about the activity. I too am surprised at the tax revenue, the significant fall off in April of hospitality tax, but apparently a recovery in May, and that will probably continue in June. And likewise, if you take a look at the activity at Town Hall, when Sean sends out the plan permit and the inspections activity, although it dropped off, it didn't drop off a lot. So there was still business going on Hilton Head Island during the emergency. And as I said earlier, I'm not naive enough to think that we are through, but at this point in the emergency's evolution, and in this point in the town and the state's response to that, I am really, really pleased and equally as surprised that there hasn't been more economic and activity loss than there has been. I think, John, this is going to be very valuable to build upon month after month, and I'll be anxious to have your presentation next month as well. I have one final question. Looking back over 4 months, and again, it's only 4 months, John, what do you see as the biggest surprise? And going forward, what do you see as the most significant risk?
Well, I think we've got to keep an eye on the hospitality tax, and we've got to keep an eye on the accommodations tax. And so those two are really going to be sensitive to the increases and decreases of tourism. But on the flip side of that, we can be thankful that property taxes and some of the other revenues are much more stable and help to balance out a cyclical revenue cycle. So I think we're at least to finish out a year with 4 months of pandemic and be able to say it looks like our general fund we hope to break even. We can be thankful that we're that close, and we did have reserves if we needed to lean upon those, but I think we might make a break even on the general fund, and that is a good place to start 2021. And the most important thing is, how are we going to address the pandemic? How can we get by COVID-19 and basically get back to normal and get back to normal collections?
Thank you, John. Any other comments or questions of John before we wrap that part of the agenda up? If there are none, John, I want to thank you also, and I look forward to next month.
Okay, thank you.
Committee, we have a need for an executive session to discuss the proposed contractual negotiations relative to the designated marketing organization services pursuant to Section 6-4-10 of the South Carolina Code of Laws. Do we have a motion to move to executive session?
Go into executive session for the reasons set forth by the chair.
Second.
Any discussion? Zendaya, will you call the roll? All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Thank you. We'll now adjourn to executive session. We are back into open session of the Finance and Administrative Committee of Tuesday, June 16th, 2020. In adjourning executive session, previously we took no action or recommended no action be taken in open session. Is there any other business to come before the committee? If there is none, I entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Harkins?
Move for adjournment.
Ms. Becker, second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.